Welcome back to Indiana Diecast Racing and the continuing action of the Final Fantasy Fracas. Today we've got all four groups of the quarterfinals. And first up, we're going to see that group in the top left. And you can see Numbskull Racing and Arlo Racing with 4 cars apiece, making up nearly 50% of the field. So, quarterfinals, Group 1. And we're back to the top 2 advancing to the next round. We've got Smooth Keith Stone from Flips Racing in his 101 gram Unobtainium. This is one of 2 cars remaining for Flips, and Keith was first in round 4 and is the top seed. Next up, we've got Crystal ZD from Arlo Racing in her 99 gram Audacious. She is one of 4 drivers and advanced on the wild card last round. We've got Numbskull from Numbskull Racing in his 98 gram Bubble Gunner. This one's the purple one. He took second in round 4 to Rumble. And Deuce from Filipiak Performance Diecast. In his 103 gram Street Shaker, he is the last man standing for FPD and the bottom seed of this round. We've got Keith, Crystal, Numbskull, and Deuce. Keith and Numbskull quickly get out front, and Crystal's not going to be able to challenge. Keith now up front. Numbskull right on his bumper. The other 2 not far behind. Keith gets some separation as he rounds the final turn, and it's Keith, Numbskull. Ooh, Deuce makes a pass over Crystal on the final straight. Taking a closer look, Crystal had a chance to get around Numbskull. Keith kind of owns this lap, wins. Whoa, and Deuce drives up on the wall to get around Crystal and earns that extra point. But after one, the number 1 seed of this round, Smooth Keith Stone, is on top. Numbskull assumes the pole for lap 2, and he's got Deuce right behind him. Or again, we're not going to have a pass in turn 2, and it's Numbskull and Deuce. Oh, Deuce falls back a little bit. Numbskull's going to run away with lap 2. And Deuce takes second. Ooh, Keith barely makes it to the line, and Crystal ZD takes 4th. This time Keith driving up on that safety barrier. Good thing we have that thing down there. And after 2, Numbskull jumps out to a 1-point lead, surpassing Smooth Keith Stone. And Crystal better get it in gear with consecutive last place finishes. Deuce out front early. Is Numbskull going to catch him? No! The bottom seed leads again for the first time today. Numbskull is closing. He gives him a tap, and it's Deuce, Numbskull, Crystal ZD finally takes 3rd, and Smooth Keith Stone a disappointing 4th. So far, turn 2 has been a non-factor in this group, but the trip down Hoth into Echo Base has been pretty close every time. Numbskull still leads after 3, and Deuce moves into 2nd place, only 1 point behind Numbskull. Crystal ZD on the pole for lap 4. And it looks like Deuce and Numbskull are going to make the pass in turn 2. Crystal challenging. Oh, there's some chaos in Echo Base. Deuce leads in reverse. They round the Savage Square. And it's going to be Deuce, Numbskull, Crystal ZD, and the number 1 seed will take an ignominious DNF on lap 4. And Numbskull and Deuce tie for the win of the group. So not only is the number 1 seed eliminated, but the bottom seed advances to the semifinals. We move on to Group 2 of the quarterfinals. And first up, it's Rumble from Arlo Racing in his baseline weighing 107 grams. He is one of 3 remaining for Arlo Racing, and he took first in round 4. Next up, we've got Topher, also from Arlo Racing. In an 83 gram Grand Cross, he finished second to Numbskull in the light blue Numbskull in the last round. And here's that driver again, so we've got a rematch. Numbskull in his 93 gram blue Bubble Gunner, and he seems to win from the front every time he starts up there. And lastly, it's Louisa from Vapor Racing, the last driver from that team in her 75-gram lethal diesel. She won the round 1 wildcard bracket and advanced as a wildcard from round 4. So we've got Rumble, Topher, Numbskull, and Louisa. Arlo, I think, has the only intra-team rivalry race this round. And Rumble, it's the all Rumble Numbskull show. Topher's 3rd, Louisa 4th. And Arlo on top and in the middle after 1. Numbskull's on the pole for lap 2, followed by Louisa. Here comes Rumble. I don't think Rumble's going to make the pass, and Numbskull leads for the first time this group. They all have a little space between. Oh, Rumble has trouble. Numbskull takes first, Rumble is second, Louisa is third, just ahead of Topher. So far, these races have been relatively tame. I think that's because everybody realizes how far they've made it in this tournament, and nobody wants to get eliminated because they took an unnecessary risk. And after 2, Rumble and Numbskull are on top with 7. Topher and Louisa on the inside lane this time are going to have to start making something happen, because the points they've been getting is not going to get them to the next round. Numbskull leads again. Looks like Rumble slots into second again. That's how they will finish. Ooh, and Louisa, little spinny spin, but takes third just ahead of Topher. Numbskull making full use of that crossover steep downhill to drive from third or second to first. And Louisa not able to hold off Rumble as well. So after 3, this one is unfortunately over. Numbskull and Rumble will be moving on, and Topher will be the second Arlo driver to be eliminated today. And unfortunately, this will be the end of the amazing second chance run by Louisa, who's sliding sideways, and she's wrecked. Louisa's on a roof. Numbskull and Rumble both get by, and they will put a not-so-fine point on the trouncing of Topher and Louisa. We'll take one last closer look at this group just to see what happened to Louisa. She gets a nice little push from Numbskull to get out front, but Topher challenges and Numbskull turns her, and in Echo Base, Numbskull completes her rollover. And that will be how Louisa, unfortunately, ends the tournament, and that also means we'll say goodbye to Vapor Racing. But we're glad they joined us. They are a super competitive team, and I'm sure they'll be back to beat everybody down in the next one. On to Group 3 out of 4. In the quarterfinals, first up is Flip from Flips Racing in his 165-gram zoom-in Frankenstein. This is the heaviest remaining car. He advanced as a wildcard, and he is now the last driver for Flips Racing. Numbskull's only non-bubble gunner. This is a Sir Ominous weighing 96 grams. He finished second to Keith in round 4. And we've got Ryan from Uncle Elvis Racing. He is the last man for that team in an 81-gram Fastmaster, and this will be a rematch between him and Flip. And another last man standing, this one for Puffs. It's Baby Richie in his 65-gram Power Pipes. So, Group 3, we've got Flip, Numbskull, Ryan, and Baby Richie, and 3 teams that are down to their last car. Flip out front early. Looks like Numbskull gets ahead of Ryan. Ryan won the matchup between him and Flip last round. Flip takes lap 1. Numbskull is second. Ooh, Ryan rail grinds barely across the line. And unfortunately, Baby Richie takes a lap 1 DNF. So far, DNFs have been a death knell in this round, as every driver that has taken one, I think, has been eliminated. So Flip on top after one. Baby Richie looking at a steep climb. Ryan on the pole, but Flip's going to easily make the pass before they even get to turn 2. Numbskull passes Ryan as well, and they're in the same order as on lap 1, I think. And it's going to be Flip, Numbskull, Ryan, and Baby Richie. Looking at the start, Flip with that super heavy car just gets a good start every time, and man, that crossover really works to his advantage. And for whatever reason, despite having a longer car, the 3D printed single lane turns don't seem to slow him down, and after 2, he's got a 2-point lead. Baby Richie on the pole for lap 3, and it looks like Ryan's going to challenge, and Ryan is going to make the pass in turn 2. Flip unable to follow, way in the back. But Baby Richie and Numbskull all over Ryan. And this lap will be Ryan, Baby Richie, Numbskull, and Flip. Ryan had a really good round 4, winning that group. And finally shows what he did last round. And it's pretty tight atop the cross. Good lord. The top 3 cars all within 1 point of each other as we go to the final lap. Numbskull on the pole, followed by Flip. And Baby Richie and Ryan able to get ahead of Flip. And I think Ryan has wrecked an Echo Base. The final lap is going to go to Numbskull. Baby Richie is second, Flip is third. And sure enough, there's Ryan on his roof back behind the Millennium Falcon. That's probably going to be the end of Ryan's tournament, unfortunately. And yeah, that super heavy Flip car just flips Ryan right off the track. And Numbskull wins. Flip takes second. So we'll say goodbye to Ryan and Baby Richie and Uncle Elvis Racing and Puffs Racing. We thank both of you guys for joining the tournament as well. So we move on to the final group of the quarterfinals. And it's Numbskull's 4th driver, this one a bubble gunner, weighing 92 grams. He could put 4 cars through to the 8-car semifinal. Next up, Motor Toms for Arlo Racing in his 91-gram lethal diesel. This is the last lethal diesel of the tournament. And the only driver remaining for G4 Diecast Racing, it's Googly G in his 99-gram Country Club Muscle. And then another last man standing, this one for Rust Belt. It's Bay City Daryl in his Nerve Hammer weighing 48 grams. This is the lightest car remaining in the tournament. We've got Numbskull, Motor Toms, Googly G, and Bay City Daryl. Numbskull out front early, but Motor Toms is challenging, and Motor Toms will make the pass, and Arlo Racing leads lap 1. I don't see Bay City Daryl. Motor Toms is going to win. Googly G gets around Numbskull to take second, and there's Bay City Daryl anchoring the field. Oh, yep. Numbskull spins and he slows enough to allow Googly G to get around. And sometime during that lap, I bit my tongue. It really hurts. And Motor Toms is out front after 1. Googly G on the pole this time, followed by Bay City Daryl. Here comes Numbskull. And Numbskull unable to complete the pass. And Googly G is going to lead the group on lap 2. Numbskull still challenging, and Googly G takes the lap just ahead of Numbskull. Motor Toms is third, and again, Bay City Daryl anchors the group. It really looked like Numbskull was going to get ahead of Googly G in turn 2, but he's just not quite able to clear him. And then Googly G whips around the outside of Echo Base to get in front. After 2, Googly G assumes the lead, 1 point over Motor Toms, 2 over Numbskull. And Bay City Daryl, now on the pole, has got to have a really strong second half. He's getting pushed down the track by Motor Toms and doesn't quite clear Googly G. Now he does. It's Bay City, Googly, Motor Toms, and Numbskull. And, oh, Googly G makes a last-second pass over Bay City Daryl to win lap 3. Taking a closer look, I think Googly G just had the tiniest bit more momentum. And Googly G is going to lock up his spot in the semifinals with that victory. Hasn't finished worse than second yet. Motor Tom's on the pole now with Numbskull behind him, Bay City and Googly G in the other lane. Tom's is first out of turn 2, followed by Numbskull. They all get a little bit of separation. Coming down the final straight, it's Motor Tom's, Numbskull, Bay City Daryl, Googly G. And that's the end of the quarterfinals. Motor Tom's and Googly G will advance. And we'll say goodbye to our awesome sponsor, Rust Belt Diecast Racing. Make sure you get over to Rust Belt Customs and buy some decals. So 5 teams remaining. And here's the groups for the semifinals. We'll have a Numbskull off in the first group. And they lead with 3 cars remaining. Arlo with 2. Everybody else with 1. This has been Jim D for Indiana Diecast Racing. Be sure to check in next time for more slightly above mediocre diecast racing and the semifinal action of the Final Fantasy Fracas.